Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Now that we have another amazing CRYO waifu, this video was an absolute inevitability. Get ready for a DPS showdown between Kamisato Ayaka and Ganyu. As usual, we need to set the playing field for our two contestants. In the hard-working and overpowered corner, we have CRYO Amber, aka Ganyu. When CRYO Amber is not eating plants like the goat that she is, or working incessantly long hours, somehow Ganyu is finding the time to be one of the most overpowered characters in Genshin Impact. My Ganyu is rocking the Wanderer's Troupe 4-piece set throughout this video. Unsurprisingly, she has the Refinement 5 Amos bow. She is also at Constellation 6, and her talents are at 10, 12, and 12. Her Bloom's damage potential is at 83%. In the still new and shiny corner, we have Kamisato Ayaka. Ayaka has made quite the splash, both literally with her dash, and also figuratively in the Genshin Impact meta. Also, have I been calling her Ayaka? Guys, you know how Ganyu is basically Amber, but CRYO, aka CRYO Amber? Well, Ayaka is basically Ganyu, but melee. Therefore, the most logical thing to conclude is that Ayaka is melee CRYO Amber. So now let's quickly take a look at my melee CRYO Amber's build. Throughout this entire video, she is using the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set and a Refinement 5 Mist Splitters Reforged. She is at Constellation 6, and her talents are at 9, 11, and 13. This puts her burst's damage potential at 80%, within 3 percentage points of my Ganyu's Bloom's damage potential. Now let's quickly go over the format of this video. I will use Zhongli when he's helpful. Zhongli is here so these characters can simply focus on doing damage. I will use party resonances. Most of the showcases utilize cryo resonance, and some of them utilize pyro or geo resonance. I start off with solo damage output. This is to allow us to gauge each character's abilities without a full team supporting them. I also have a showcase of these characters with a full team as well, and as usual that is in the Abyss 12 section. And now for everyone's favorite part of the video, but also one of the most important, the disclaimers. As always, every single one of these runs can be improved. I have a limited amount of time and also a limited amount of creativity when compared to the entire player base. It's likely that you have seen better runs by these characters and can spot improvements that I can make. I'm always open to constructive feedback, so let me know in the comments below if you spot stuff like that. These runs are all simply my best faith approach towards each of them with each of the characters. This video is by no means an end-all be-all for these characters, but just one point of reference and comparison between the two. So now that CRYO Amber and melee CRYO Amber are ready to battle, let's finally start the DPS showdown. Starting off with everyone's original favorite residential punching bag, volunteer, the Pyro Regisvine. With a new DPS showdown comes the inevitable demise of our harmless sleeping giant plants. The Pyro Regisvine is a boss where I usually don't bother setting up too many abilities prior to knocking it down. So in a way, this is a demonstration of how quickly each of these contestants can do around 200,000 damage immediately after swapping in. Well, they both absolutely obliterated our unfortunate plant friend. In this situation, Ayaka's Constellation 2's mini bursts easily connect to the giant stationary hitbox of the Pyro Regisvine. For Ganyu, I had to crit fish and also buffer a C6 prior to the fight. And in order for Ganyu to have pulled this off, she needed to basically crit almost all of her hits. This was a bit painful, but a necessary evil for Ganyu in many scenarios. With a bit of luck and most of her hits critting, Ganyu squeaked out a tiny victory here. The next volunteer is Dvalin. I remember when the game just came out, and Dvalin was actually challenging to me at first. It used to be a big deal to one cycle his Zit after knocking him out of the sky. Nowadays, well, Dvalin has become another unfortunate victim of countless showcase videos. I think it's to no one's surprise that Ganyu won this one. With a clever cast of Ganyu's burst prior to knocking Dvalin out of the sky, we were able to get away with one less charge shot against Dvalin. Using Constellation 6 on Ganyu here is a bit difficult though, since you need to re-aim after each use of Ganyu's elemental skill. Nonetheless, an impressive showcase from Ganyu the GOAT. Ayaka still did exceptionally well as well. Once Ayaka climbed up Dvalin's Pimple, a simple press of the Q key is more than enough to take it out. Given how short this fight is, it was not even worth doing Ayaka's dash and normal attack to further buff her burst's damage. Instead, just using her burst ASAP provided the quickest result. The Schneznaya man Child is the next volunteer in our video, and although the newest member of the Futui Harbingers is now a bit of an antiquated boss fight, Child is a multi-phase fight that also spawns really far away from the player. This is another fight where having nearly unlimited range is extremely beneficial. Ganyu not only can completely ignore any damage that Child does, thanks to her bow and thus not needing Zhongli, she also doesn't have to worry about commute time, being able to shoot literal trucks at her foes from across the map. However, this is another fight similar to the Pyrovine, where crit fishing really speeds up her time. Despite Ayaka needing to rely entirely on her basic attacks and elemental skill for the first two phases of the fight, this was still a relatively painless experience. But it is clear that Ayaka's first two forms of Child did take longer than Ganyu. But once it was third form Child's turn, it was simply a matter of pressing Q with Ayaka in order to take it out in no time at all. Now for the Primo Geo Vishap. It honestly felt like yesterday when this oversized sentient rock was the biggest, baddest boss on the block. Now it has replaced the Regisvines as one of my personal favorite volunteers. The Primo Geo Vishap allows for many free seconds of setup time prior to becoming vulnerable. Now we finally have a fight that really demonstrates the power of Ayaka's burst. Ayaka's burst hits 60 times, and each cycle of hits from her 3 spinning cryo balls of death was doing around 42,000 damage each. On top of that, Ayaka can poke it with her sword as well. Finally, buffering Ayaka's long burst animation time prior to the Primo Geo Vishap becoming vulnerable, which is when I start timing, is hugely helpful for Ayaka. Now you may look at Ganyu's time of 12 seconds here and think, wow, she is so much slower than Ayaka. While that is true, 12 seconds is still a remarkable time for solo beating up the Primo Geo Vishap. As for the actual fight, Ganyu is able to buffer her burst and charge up a charge shot prior to the fight starting. Then it was simply a matter of pumping out enough charge shots to finish the fight. With the release of Inazuma comes many more volunteers, and although I've been calling all of our previous victims volunteers, we finally have an actual volunteer, Masanori, this samurai NPC. He graciously allows us to beat him up over and over in order for us to see how much damage we can do. Despite being the most willing of volunteers, I actually find Masanori to be a rather boring fight. Maybe it's when they play hard to get that makes them more interesting, like the Regisvines needing their orbs to be broken. Anyway, there is an element of RNG to delay his transformations. This is not a fight I'm incredibly familiar with yet, but it was interesting to test out these two characters against him. Overall, a rather innocuous set of runs is difficult to extrapolate any convincing conjectures. And now for Magu Kenki. Magu Kenki supposedly has a mechanic that blocks ranged attacks. Can Ganyu overcome this crippling mechanic from Magu Kenki? Originally, when I heard about this mechanic, I thought he might completely nullify anything that's considered a ranged attack, but instead it's based on your range to him. As such, Ganyu can simply shoot her nuclear arrows at point blank. To trivialize that mechanic, Ganyu can essentially queue up 2 free charge shots during this fight, 1 for each phase, which really does help her out here. Ayaka the Boss Slayer is unfortunately reliant on her comparatively subpar basic attack DPS to take out the Magu Kenki's first form, but after that, with an early Q of Ayaka's burst, second form Magu Kenki may as well just not exist. The time lost during the first phase was made up by Ayaka's ability to completely annihilate the second phase. And last but not least for the overworld, we have the Sentient Lego Kit, also known as the Perpetual Mechanical Array or something like that. This boss has 3 forms, all with different shapes and sizes for its Lego arrangements. Now you might be wondering why I threw in our favorite Batman LARPer Diluc and his friends. And no, it wasn't to just bully him or anything like that, but it was to demonstrate just how crazy Ganyu and Ayaka are. Diluc, even with 3 of his best supports, Bennett, Xingqiu, and an offensively oriented Zhongli, still absolutely decimated this boss. But it took his entire team longer in comparison to Ganyu and Ayaka with only the support of Zhongli's shield. Although many people argue that in-game comparisons are useless, this is one reason why I think in-game comparisons are useful. Someone may have watched that Diluc clip in a vacuum and thought, wow, he is amazing. And frankly, in the past, he was amazing. But MiHoYo keeps releasing more and more overpowered characters, which put even a fully built Diluc's team to shame. Do you think this power creep is too much? Let me know what you think. As for Ayaka's run against the Lego boss, she completely bypasses even the first attack cycle of the Lego boss, forcing it to go into panic mode immediately before its first attack. This causes our Lego friend to summon his Lego friends for you to fight in its stead. Yet another large and mobile target becoming a victim to the Kamisato art Sometsu. Ayaka's E and charge attack, while a bit inferior to Ganyu's charge shots, at Constellation 6 they are no slouches either, and we're still able to quickly take out the boss's second and third forms. Surprisingly, this is another run where Ganyu actually had to crit fish again. It was crucial for Ganyu to take out its first form before the boss does its second attack, and missing a few crits in a row ruins that. Due to the way this fight is structured, as well as the duration of the fight, Ganyu is able to get 5 Constellation 6 charge shots off, which is enough to make almost anything in Teyvat shudder in fear. And finally, it's time for the Abyss 12 Gauntlet. but with cards. But before we dive into that, might I ask you to subscribe? Compiling all these clips took many days, and I really do my best to showcase these characters at their best. Subscribing is just a click away, and it does a ton to support my channel. Anyway, for this Abyss 12 Gauntlet section, we decided we would use cards. Fortunately, the cards across both teams were extremely similar, and mostly helped diminish the RNG required. And yes, did I say we? That's right. For any sort of extremely optimized Melt Ganyu performance, I always ask Alyss. Link to Alyss's YouTube channel will be in the description below. Then we have little old me doing Ayaka's run. Anyway, let's take a look at the runs and then break them down. Ganyu managed to curb stomp the entire first half of Abyss 12 in a mere 38.73 seconds. Although 12-1 was only 6.4 seconds, behind it was a ton of fishing. No, not that kind of fishing that Klee is a big fan of, but fishing for crits. Alyss's Ganyu has 40.8% crit rate. With the crit rate card, which provides 8% crit rate, this puts his Ganyu at 48.8% crit rate. Doing some quick napkin math, for all 4 of his blooms to crit, that's an 11% chance. This doesn't even include the possibility of either of his skills not critting on one of the Geovishaps. Alyss had to crit fish for quite a lot in order to get this run. 12-2-1 is entirely dominated by Anemo supports, Kazuha and Venti. Whether it's Ganyu in this situation or Ayaka in this situation, the result is very similar. Using the Anemo supports to wipe out the first wave, and then gather the second wave. Then finally, you can finish off the CRYO Mage with whatever DPS character you have. 12-3-1 is another floor, yet again dominated by Anemo supports. Thanks to the Pyro Abyss Mage, Kazuha is able to infuse Pyro onto his burst to allow Ganyu to two-shot the Abyss Lector. Then the rest is up to Swirl RNG for Venti and Kazuha to knock out the Abyss Lector's shield. Ayaka's run through 12-1 is simple. Freeze them next to each other, then let Ayaka's burst completely obliterate them. There are a few reasons why it took longer for Ayaka to complete this than Ganyu, and that is mostly entirely due to frame data. (12-2-1) is the same strategy. Use the Anemo supports to wipe out the first wave and gather them up in the second wave. However, what's different here is Bennett versus Mona. Bennett applies Pyro Infusion, which easily gets rid of the Cryo Shield that happens at the 15-second mark. However, because we can't infuse Hydro and wipe out the first wave with just the Anemo characters, we actually need to freeze the second wave with Mona's burst in order to remove the Cryo Shield to take out the Sentient Mage. The difference in times between the 12-2 chamber can mostly be accounted to needing to do Mona's burst. 12-3-1 has a lot of creativity for approaching it, and by no means am I claiming that my approach with Ayaka is optimal, but nonetheless, luckily with Ayaka and Freeze, the strategy is fairly consistent, up until the RNG swirls to take out the Abyss Lector's lightning shield. Overall, both of these Abyss 12 Gauntlet runs do have time to improve, with roughly 2 to 3 seconds on each of them accordingly. Now that we have a bigger picture for how these two performed against many of the overworld bosses and the current, but soon to be gone, Abyss 12 cycle, let me know what you guys think about how these two characters performed. Needless to say, both Cryo Amber and Melee Cryo Amber are completely cracked, just like Amber is. Melee Cryo Amber with her burst has a slight advantage against large or immobile targets with very high HP pools like bosses. And Cryo Amber does have an advantage in range favorable matchups as well as being able to melt stuff in a team setting. And finally, Cryo Amber has better frame data, especially at Constellation 6 when it comes to outputting the majority of her damage. Ultimately though, you really can't go wrong with either of these broken CRYO characters, and in my opinion, it boils down to your preference of which character you prefer. Now, which character do you think won this DPS Showdown? Who do you think is the better CRYO Amber? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out. Kissing.